Looks like you're all stuck with me now. Hope you chose wisely. Yeah. You see this pretty well? Pretty good back there? All right. I haven't been in this room before, so I don't know how the lighting works. Okay. Cool. Alrighty. Looks like just about everybody's in here, made their choices. Can you hear me in the back pretty well? Good? Alrighty. Awesome. Thanks for making the choice. Tips and tricks. Everybody always loves it, right? What's that?
Coming over here, not over there.
Yeah. You're right. It's a hard choice. I'm David Janicki. I'm from Fisher Unitech. Just a little bit about myself. If this is going to go ahead and click through. There we go. I've been using CAD for about 6 years, NX and CATIA before I started to use SolidWorks, just a touch of AutoCAD. For all those who were asking, hey, did you ever actually draft? I did have to draft. I did have to do that by hand, so went through that pain as well. I've been working with Fisher for about 2 years now. I did get married in June. It's been a couple of fun 3 months, so interesting going along. My job as an application engineer, I'm usually out demoing to you guys, meeting with customers, trying to solve some issues, or in the class doing actual trainings. So, and I love to do this, but shout out to anybody else who's a fellow Bronco here, right? Anybody? There we go. All right, let's go Broncos. Not starting off to a good football year, but I mean, after last year, what can you expect? So, and that's my dog, so I don't know, just a fun extra thing. So tonight's obviously going to be tips and tricks, right? Just so that you can hopefully get a little bit of everything. Tips and tricks is a very broad subject. We're going to try and touch on everything from interface, sketching, going into parts, assemblies, and wrapping up with drawings, right? If you want to specify it next time, specify, because this is a very broad thing, kind of hard to dive into the deep grass. So at any point, feel free to jump in, ask any questions, just throw your hand up. Hopefully I'll see you. If not, just shout Dave, and then hopefully I'll hear you. But without that, we'll jump into it. And I'm going to point out some of these are going to be very basic to you. We have a lot of different users coming to these things, so I want to make sure we try and get something for hopefully everybody, right? So once we start getting into our interface, just about as basic as things can get is using what are going to be called these little pin drops, right? So you probably see them all over the place inside of SolidWorks, left and right. Maybe you don't know what they are. If you hit this little pin drop, it's actually going to lock it into its location where it's at. It's going to keep it there. So if you ever have a pop-out window that you actually want to keep there, 9 out of 10 times there's going to be a little pin drop. You can actually click it and it'll stay. That way when you click somewhere else, it won't shoot off to the side and you lose it, right? The cool thing about this is you can also pin things to your recent documents. So if you're one of those guys who's using maybe the same 10 parts over and over again, maybe as your template, maybe as your base, or you're just dragging and dropping it in there, it's pretty handy to just plug it onto this menu. And to get to this menu, if you don't know, you're just hitting the R key, right? It'll pop this thing up and go from there. Nice thing about this thing too, though, is it's not just, hey, I want to open a part. You can actually dive into the various ways you can open parts. So if you got or want to go into lightweight mode or different configuration or different display states, especially if you're even using SpeedPack, all of that stuff can be fired up straight from that little menu. So don't feel like it's kind of sticking you to just open up your full rendered part, which if you get into something as big as something like this truck, that might end up taking a long time, right? So when you have very large parts, might very well know that pain. Just a quick one, and I really, really hope that everybody already knows this, but switching between different windows inside of SolidWorks, doing Control Tab, so typically how you do maybe an Alt Tab in your Windows environment, it's going to do the same thing inside of SolidWorks, right? So you can go between part and drawing very quickly as opposed to going down to the bottom of your windows, clicking on SolidWorks, figuring out which one you want, right? Kind of continuing on. Again, these are kind of just getting to know a few things in here. So hopefully you know about the command search. This is especially helpful if you're coming over from a different software. It does actually know how to reference certain AutoCAD or Pro E commands. So if there's certain things that you came from that you know it as something else, you can actually search that, and a lot of times it'll correlate it. I can't say it's going to work 100% because I don't know if you can say 100% about anything, right? The cool thing about this is from this little menu, I can actually drag it and drop it onto my command manager, or if you hit these little eyeglasses, what it's going to do is find wherever out in SolidWorks this command is that you're looking for. It's going to do a big fat red arrow for you. So it's pretty hard to miss, right? So even if it's in like the tools and it's dropping down and it's dropping down again, it's going to open up all those menus and show you right where it's at, right? So it can be extremely handy when it gets into that. And this is kind of touching off that same thing of, to get straight into this little search bar, you don't have to actually go up there and click it. You can either hit your S key or your W key, and it's going to put your command prompt, I can't think of what it's called, but so I can start typing right away up into that window, so I can just start searching for things right away. Context toolbar. I personally am a huge fan of this. I use it a lot. It's just kind of maybe my mentality, the way I like to use it. But anytime you hit your S key, aside from it shooting you up into that prompt up there, it's also going to open this context toolbar. And inside of here, you can start to put various commands that you use very often. So maybe some of you who do mouse gestures are like, this is dumb, I don't care. But inside of here, you can customize it per assemblies, per drawings, per sketching, and per parts. So kind of those 4 different environments that you're in, right? You can decide, hey, what do I want on here? What is it that I use very often? Kind of going hand in hand with that. Let me know if I'm going too fast. I have a habit of just rambling a little bit, so just if I'm doing that, just let me know. I'll slow it down. When we get to mouse gestures, right? Very similar to your context toolbar, but in here, nope. We're going up to customize. From there, it's going to open up this window, and right now in 2017, you can do either 4 or 8 different gestures, but come 2018, you're actually going to be able to do between 2 and 12 different gestures. So depending on if maybe this is the way that you like to do things, you can have all the way up to 12 different gestures slapped onto this thing in the various places. The one really cool, ones that I like to make sure everyone knows, because I think it just came out in 2015 or so, is that you can actually put your check marks and your cancels on your mouse gestures, right? So if that's, again, the way that you function and you just like to, go straight from your 2 mouses or something like that, you can have your 2 check marks or your X right there and just keep moving forward. This is, again, one of those, it's kind of a quick little thing. If you don't like to, or maybe you have a hard time rotating your part, maybe you don't have a 3D mouse, with your arrow keys, you can start to rotate your part at a designated value. So if we're looking at it here, you can define that. So if you want to maybe go a certain amount, 15 degrees at a time over, just use your arrow keys, you can go from there. Additionally, if you wanted to roll, and when we're thinking of rolling versus rotating, rolling is like me spinning the part, like kind of like turning a doorknob, as opposed to just turning that doorknob like sideways. So you hold down your Alt key, and it does that thing. Along with, if you hold down Control, it's going to pan your part left and right, up and down. One thing I really want to point out is going to be breadcrumbs. Now, for those of you who have seen them, hopefully you've used them. If you haven't used them, there's actually some pretty cool functionality in there. And they've made it to the point where you can kind of use it without having to go up into that top corner. For some reason, SolidWorks is trying to have people get rid of their feature manager, and this is kind of one of those steps. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but this is one of the ways that you can potentially work entirely inside of your modeling environment without really clicking around. So just to kind of show you what that might look like is, if I've got this part, as soon as I click any face, it's going to give me these breadcrumbs up top, right? And when we're looking at these things, give me that. It's giving me a lot of different stuff. So depending on what face you're selecting, it's going to start at that level and drive all the way up. So since this is an assembly, It's telling me this face is part of this feature, which is part of this solid model. So if I have a multi-body part, this would potentially be something different. And then to that part to the assembly. So you're starting to kind of go through the various levels and all the associated different things that are included in there as you go. So, right, if I've got some of this different geometry, you can see you can quickly get to your various mates if you're in there. And the key thing that just happened there was when you hit your D key, it's going to bring those breadcrumbs directly to your cursor. So you don't have to actually go up into the corner. Hitting the D key brings them right there. You can start clicking on stuff as you see fit. And then if I wanted to potentially, change up a sketch that was needed for that loft feature, I can just go ahead, right click on whatever it is. It'll start kind of going from there. And again, using that D key to bring my confirmation corner to my cursor. It's just gonna kind of go through making the changes. One additional thing in those breadcrumbs, nope, it's gonna, okay. We'll go back. Here we go. Is when it comes to certain mates, like let's say my concentric, or if you have profile mates, from these breadcrumbs you can actually lock your rotation. So we'll just backtrack this a quick second. If I right click on that concentric mate from those breadcrumbs, we're going to get this new little drop down menu. And right from there it's telling me, hey, I can lock rotation. Now that thing's actually applied, I don't have to actually go over here on the left hand side and find that mate, wherever it might be. This is kind of one of those little housekeeping things. If you have a lot of reference geometry, if you've got a lot of just things going on inside of your part, you just want to see just your part, not a whole lot of the extra goo. They have it where you can now unview all, so like all that extra stuff. If I click this little eyeball on my heads up toolbar, it's going to get rid of all that stuff. It's going to hide all of it. It's just going to leave me with my part, so I can kind of go quickly from there. Hand in hand with that is when I'm in assemblies, I'm starting to drop these things down. I'm starting to open everything up. Maybe I take this lower bogey wheel and drop it down. It's got a sub-assembly, drop it down. A lot of times you get to the point where that feature manager is extremely messy, or feature tree, sorry. Extremely messy. You can't see a whole lot of stuff that you want to see. Cleaning it up is just hitting Shift and C, and it's going to take everything and just swoop, bring it up to top level. Everything's going to be just there, back to how it started. In addition over here, if you're ever trying to find a whole bunch of things that are extremely similar, maybe you want to suppress all the bolts in your part. Up here, oh my gosh, gotta get used to that. Okay, so up here above your feature tree, you've got the filter tab, and inside of here, it's going to. Why does it keep doing that? All right, we'll try and get it back to where. Okay, so as I'm doing that, it's going to filter out both on my feature tree, and it's going to filter things out graphically. So from here, I could just simply, box select things if I needed to, and then suppress them all at once. Right, and then if I go back up here, click that X, remove it, it's going to be back to how I was looking at it originally. But it just allows me a good way to actually filter things out in my tree. One thing to note is, and this is probably going to come along more so in drawings, so if I ever actually want to select maybe all the edges of my part or maybe all the faces of my part all at one time without individually clicking every single one of them, if I click whatever it is I'm trying to get, right, that face or that edge, and I hit the Control A, okay, hit Control A, it's going to go in your model and select all of the identical things, right? So maybe I wanted to see the length of all the edges of my part. That could be one way to do that. As you're getting going, if you're new, one thing I can't help but point out is going to be the little help buttons. Even for people who have worked on the software a long time, even you are going to come across this little question mark with an asterisk. And the difference between this is basically everything and anything that this feature is. It's going to explain, hey, this is what I'm looking for in this box. This is what this little option does for you, why it's important. And then this asterisk question mark one, you're not going to find it everywhere. All it's referring to is what's new in the most recent year. So any enhancements to the software, anything that wasn't in it the year before, or maybe the service pack before or something, it's going to be kind of with that asterisk button. You can click on there and it's only going to show you that what's new portion. So it's only going to tell you what aspect has changed, why do I care, right? So it's kind of just that quick way to get any explanation of any parameter on your part. Maybe you just haven't used the tool in a while and you kind of want a refresher, right? That brings us up to our sketching portion. So any questions on anything in the interface I showed? I know I'm just kind of showing you videos. At any point we can go into SolidWorks if you got questions. So, okay, cool. So as we're going into sketching, one thing to note is going to be if you're somebody who's using a lot of these auto transition between lines and arcs. Now typically, when you're doing this, you go off, you come back to your home point, and you go off again, and now you got your little thing. Additionally, if you go ahead and actually just go off that point and hit your A key, that's going to toggle between a line and an arc back and forth, right? I will note, if you are one of those people who does use the arc, where you just go back home, maybe it's the way that you like it, right? Maybe it's just something you're comfortable with. So right, if we're somehow doing an arc right now, and you actually want to change it back to a line without hitting your A key, for, again, whatever reason, if you actually just bring it back here and click that endpoint again, it's going to go back to a line. So some people don't know that. They usually end up getting frustrated, click escape. You have to start all over again. But if I'm starting in this arc and I want to change it back, I can either hit my A key or click that endpoint that I started from. This is one that probably won't get used all that often, and I think it can be just as easily done with escape, but it's one of those things I like to mention if you happen to be the rare case. But let's say you're dragging this piece and you bring it all the way over here, and then you decide, hey, that's not at all what I wanted to do. And you're still holding on your left mouse clicker. If I go ahead and actually right click when I'm over here, we'll figure that out one of these times. So as soon as I right click, it's just going to go back to its original location. Now, I would maybe just place it and then do Control Z and do the same thing. But if you're one of those people who, again, is working strictly on mouses, that might be helpful for you to undo whatever it is you were doing. So we were talking about the D key bringing those breadcrumbs to you, right? It's also going to bring your confirmation corner to your mouse pointer as well. So whatever's in that corner, if you're in a sketch and you want to get out of your sketch, it'll bring it to your mouse clicker and you can click that button, or maybe it's a check mark and you want to bring it there. Whatever's in that top right corner, right? It's just going to bring it to your mouse and click whatever you want to do. Again, one of these very beginner things that some people, again, just don't know about, hopefully a lot of you are using them, is just keyboard shortcuts and assigning them and how really, really simple and easy it is. If I were to maybe want to assign maybe my sketch command to something, let's say we want to assign it to my Q button. I will say if you're going to assign your sketch, be very careful because there are about 7 different sketch commands inside of there for various different reasons. And you got to make sure that when you're inside of here trying to assign it to something, that it's in the insert category. Because there's one for edit that does absolutely nothing when you hit the key, unless you have something already pre-selected, something along those lines. But if I were to kind of go in here, assign that to my Q button, out in space, if I hit Q, boom, I'm already in my sketch. I didn't have to go up top left, start assigning things. I can start sketching right from there, right? So hopefully most of you know that already. Obviously a very simple thing, especially if you're coming from different softwares. You're very used to using keybind commands. But just kind of the fact that it's there, right? So there's no command in itself called the extend tool, but inside of the trim command, it itself can actually be used as an extender for any line that you have if you just hold down the shift key. So I can see as I'm starting to go around this thing, I'm just power trimming and all those lines are extending to the nearest edge.
Is that only 17?
Nope, I believe this came out in 15 at least. Yeah. So just holding down that shift key. If you're doing power trim, it's going to shoot anything out. If you're doing some of your other ones, it'll work, obviously, however those things work, right? But for those people who often do that, and I guess one thing inside of here I also want to note is if you are power trimming and you are power trimming a lot of things, like let's say I end up power trimming half this stuff anyways, and I get down here and I maybe nick this line and I didn't mean to. On each of these things, anytime you pass over something, you're going to get a little red box. And with that little red box, if I actually just retrace my steps very carefully and pass back over it, it's going to bring that line segment back. So whatever it is that I trimmed that I didn't want to trim, it's going to bring it back into my sketch. So if I guess a good example is if I'm trimming like 50 things, and I'm on number 49 or 50, and then I do an extra, you just go back through that red box, it'll undo whatever it is you trimmed, and you've got your completed thing you're doing, right? For those of you who are doing a lot of dimensions for diameters kind of in one go, so for a part like this that I'm going to be revolving, maybe each one of those outside edges I'm actually going to use as a diameter dimension. What you can do is if I go ahead, again, make my diameter dimension, I'm doing it to myself. And I guess I'm hoping that you know diameter dimensions are a thing. Does anybody not know diameter dimensions are a thing? Did I cover that? Okay. Just want to make sure. Sometimes people don't know about it. So inside of here, though, if I am going and clicking one, as soon as I finish with that first one, if I don't click anything else, you're going to notice your mouse icon now has this little D with a center line on it. What that's telling me is straight from here, I can start actually just diameter dimensioning whatever edges I actually want to go to. So as soon as I click this next line, it's automatically assuming that I want to make that a diameter. So I can kind of keep going, placing that one, and it's going to stay. If I select the next one, it's going to stay still, all the way until I select something different or escape out, right? When it comes to plane creation, again, a very simple thing. But sometimes people, again, don't know about this, that you can drag a brand new plane off of another plane very quickly by holding down your control button. So if you're just kind of on the corner where you're getting one of those arrows, if you're holding down control, holding down your left mouse button, you can just easily drag a new one right off of that, right? To whatever distance it is that you want, you can start typing things straight from there. A lot of times, as you're making sketches, auto dimensions can actually get in the way. They're extremely annoying sometimes when you're just trying to have it maybe a little bit off of, that line, but it keeps locking to it. So you're going to see kind of as I'm going to it, it's trying to go vertical, but maybe I don't want that. So as soon as you hold down your control key, it's going to give you just that option to pass over any of the potential auto relations that you have. So holding down that control, boom, it's not going to lock on anything. You don't have to worry about it. It's not going to have that relation applied to it anymore, right? Just another quick thing. If you're entering, exiting any sketches, you can actually do so by just double-clicking on an entity that's part of it. So if I wanted to get into a sketch, I could just double-click on a sketch entity. They'll shoot me straight into it. If I want to get out, I can just double-click off in space, right? It's going to take me out. Next thing we got here is actually applying a sketch directly to an edge. So if I don't want to have to try and make a new plane, that is perfectly normal to the endpoint that I'm trying to make something on. So in the case of this, maybe my bottom plane or that face doesn't work correctly. If I actually go back, click on that line, and then go and click a new sketch, it's going to create a new plane wherever that endpoint is of that line. And it's going to be dependent on where I'm selecting. So, since I selected kind of over here and then hit sketch, it's going to create it at this endpoint where those two intersect. But if I had done it, right, this is still one same arc. If I had done it on this side and then done sketch, it would have created it on that bottom intersection. So whatever it's closest to, whatever endpoint it sees nearest, that's where it's going to create it. The plane? No, so I had kind of the shortcut toolbar that I used, and I just clicked sketch, and it just made it pretty quickly. So what you're doing is you're just selecting an edge, and then you could go up here and select sketch, and it'll create it wherever that endpoint is.
If I don't have a shortcut, it goes to the menu?
Yep, yep. As long as you're hitting the sketch button, it's all. Yep. So again, right, I could just sing in there, start sketching right from there, do some features, maybe throw out a couple dimensions. Let's just give myself some time to grab a drink here. So, okay. And again, maybe you're going to do a sweep cut. So this is kind of an easy example of, hey, I'm trying to sweep off this end, get something going from here, cut it out, right? Boom. So that brings us to the end of sketching. Again, any questions, anybody? Awesome. Awesome. So moving on to parts. Inside of here, starting off with updating orientation. So if you ever maybe create your part and then later down the road you realize, oh my gosh, that front view is supposed to be my top view. Something like that. Obviously, normally you want to actually go back and fix it, but maybe you just need to get a quick drawing out and you don't have to worry about it. What you can do is, if this is my top view currently, or sorry, front view, inside of here there is a toggle called Update Standard Views. And with that, when I select it, it's giving me an option to, okay, it sees the view that I currently have. And when I say Update Standard View, it's asking me what I would like to change it to. So instead of this little pop-out window, if I click this top view, it's basically telling the software, hey, I want to change the view I see here to that top view. And it's going to give me this window that's saying, you know, changing this view, it's going to change the orientation of all your junk, yada, yada, yada. You sure you want to do that, right? We're going to end up saying yes. As soon as we do so, if we go ahead and try that top view, boom, that's now our updated top view. So then we can go over to our drawings, and those will be updated, right? So that's kind of just a quick and dirty if, hey, I want to update this thing without starting fresh, right? Yeah, yep. So that's what it was showing at the end, just rotating it. Yep. Freeze bar, again, not always the most important thing in the world, but it can be extremely helpful for reducing rebuild times. If you've got a part with a humongous feature tree, to enable it, it's just going to be in your options, and then it's going to be found at the top. It's very similar to your suppression bar, or your rollback bar, sorry. So I can just drag it up and down. And what it's doing is basically freezing each of these features, so when I actually go to rebuild this part, if I do a hard rebuild, it's not going to include any of those. It's just going to, maybe I change the diameter of this over here and I don't want it to care about any of the rest of the stuff. It'll only rebuild that one section. So especially if you got a part that's like vastly different and you're only changing something over here and you don't care about some stuff over here, you can freeze all that goo, just work over there and none of that's affected. And it'll reload much, much faster.
Is it similar to suppressing?
In a sense, but suppressing is going to take it out of your model. Freezing it, all that geometry is still there, all your features are still intact, nothing's gone. It's just not going to rebuild it. So any changes that you're making aren't going to be affecting that, right? Yep. So to get it, you're going to go up to your settings, go up to options, and then it's going to be on that first general tab. Right there, just enable freeze bar, right? And then once it's in there, you're just going to find it up at the top right there, right?
Where was that in?
2015 again, maybe? I feel like there's a couple things coming out in 2015 that. It is. So at the bottom is going to be your suppression bar, which is literally going to take whatever feature you have out of your part. So if I have this hole, if I rolled this bar back above it, that would literally take the hole out of my part. It wouldn't be visible anymore. Okay. It's no problem.
Turn it on.
It's no problem, yep. So we first got to turn it on because I think by default it's off. It's going to be in your options. And where you turn it on is right here, enable freeze bar. Yep. Yep. And then when we're actually over here, I'm going to try and pause it right at the time. Yeah, so it's right there. And then you just drag it down. Yep.
Does the freeze bar help reduce time if you have a complex geometry that's just like a dumb surface or solid body that doesn't really have any references or anything, but it's like an imported surface? If you freeze that, would that help at all, or does it really matter?
I don't think that's gonna.
No, it's not going to be, because you're not calculating. It's just still an imported body. You still got the graphics triangles that are, yeah. Again, another thing I think was done in 2015 that used to be needed, used to have to do like an actual equation, is doing an up to reference for linear patterns. So instead of actually having to kind of write that equation, make some variables, do all this stuff, now inside of linear pattern, there's an option for up to reference. Inside of there, I can choose whatever face it is that I want to go it up to. Again, I can start to change around what is my spacing, or depending on what it is, you can do your dimensions or instances, right? So all those same options are still going to be in there, but it's going to be affecting things a little bit differently. So you can see this thing was going from the centroid of, more or less the centroid of that. And so I only wanted 4 instances no matter what. So as I start to push and pull that thing, it's always still going to be 4. If I change this to a certain spacing, again, as we watch this thing, as it starts to, we'll just wait for it. Okay. So as we start to drag that face, it's going to fill in as many as it needs to actually have a full piece, right? So again, instead of something that used to be done by equations, now it's just an option inside of linear patterns. When you're using actual imported parts, a lot of times you actually need to delete things, take certain things out. Maybe you're just trying to get a dumb solid that's even dumber. An example of this part, this is where we can start to use delete faces. So maybe I just want this raw bar stock or whatever it is, want to get rid of all these holes. Inside of here, on our surfaces tab, you're going to find the option for delete face. And now with this, I want to remove these holes. And the thing to be cautious of is there are a couple options in here you want to make sure that you're using. If I delete it, it's just going to delete.
Are you working with an IGES file? I missed that first part.
It's just a dumb solid, so anything that came in just imported. I don't know if it was an IGES or a step. I'm off that. Yep. It's just a dumb solid. Yep. But the thing to kind of keep in mind here is if I want to patch this thing and make sure that I'm not just literally removing this face and leaving basically an open gap. If I just left it as delete and I deleted that face, I would just see the top piece, the bottom piece, and it would just be nothing there. But instead, inside of here, we've got this option for delete and patch. And when we do that, when I delete that face, instead of kind of removing it, it's actually going to fill it all in, patch it off, so it's kind of a clean surface. I don't have to worry about it as much, right? Another thing, and I think this is going to be new for 2016. If you had Pro or Premium, you already had access to FeatureWorks, but if you had Standard, and I think 2015 and before, you couldn't. And in 2016, you can now use FeatureWorks, no matter what your license is, depending on what it is. And you've probably seen FeatureWorks before. Anytime you bring an imported body in, it's going to show you it. You can either use the FeatureWorks all at one time, or you can get one feature at a time just by doing a bad job with that. Okay. Like if I clicked on this face right here, and I kind of got that context toolbar popping up, if I just did the edit feature, what it's going to do is dynamically load my FeatureWorks for me. So it's going to define whatever it is aspect of the part it is and start to give me some dimensions for it. Right? So again, it's kind of just looking at this thing, adding anything it needs.
You know if this is using the TF kernel, or is it still in the graphics
It should still be the SolidWorks kernel because I don't believe it's changing anything. It's bringing it into SolidWorks calculations.
Talking about 16.
They didn't change the kernel. I don't think they changed anything as far as the kernels go.
Still
It should be. I haven't heard anything changing. So yeah, changing all that stuff, right? And now we got it in our feature tree. Pretty straightforward. One additional thing in here is going to be Flatten Surface. One thing I do want to note is this is only sadly available in premium, but if you already got premium, pretty cool to use. If I got something curved like this, it's kind of difficult to tell what the actual dimensions of it are, right? On your Surfaces tab, there's an option to flatten, and with that, I can select a face. I can choose an edge I actually want to flatten it from. And then you've got this bar down here that's kind of the scale of how tight of knit do I want those graphics triangles, right? How close do I want it to actually look at those grooves and see how tight it is?
I'd like to see that way with the compound surface.
Yeah. Yeah. We can try and tie that back at the end. And then from there, what it's going to give you is, if you right-click on it, you can actually get a deformation plot, right? So it's going to show me kind of, hey, here's how much this thing was pushing or pulling, what type of tension or compression is going on, and kind of giving you that scale, right? So I could shoot that off to wherever it is I need from there.
Is it only for SolidWorks surface body?
You can do it on anything as long as it's face, right?
And is that make it
Yep. Yeah, you should be able to. I think I've done it before, because when you're opening up that box, it's asking for which faces are that you want to select entirely, right? So as long as it's got a good spot, because I'm pretty sure I've done it on a piece of sheet metal before. As long as it knows where it's starting from, it should be able to unfold everything and give it to you. What's that? It's just got to have a vertex to go from. I think you can undo it from an edge, so it's just got to be something that's got a linear way for it to know. So I think you can use, I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure you can use a plane potentially. Now,
The tool was designed for flattening out a cushion, so it should work on the compound surface too.
yeah, at some point there should be a spot to get it from. But yeah. Alrighty. Next thing we got here is going to be Fillet Selection Manager. So if you are maybe trying to fillet basically every single edge on this part, you fire up fillets. If I go ahead and select this one, what we're going to get is a kind of pop-up toolbar here. It's going to try and help me guess at, or it's basically SolidWorks guessing at the additional edges that you might want to select. So if I start to kind of go over these different options, it's showing me kind of in that purple preview all the other ones that if you chose that, that's what it would select. And then it's going to put all those things in there, right? Now, to actually turn that thing on, because it's usually an option, if you're doing manual versus the Fillet Expert, there's usually just a toggle at the bottom that says enable selection enhancement or something along those lines where it's saying enable selection something, right? And basically from there, my selections are chosen. And as soon as I hit that check mark, right, it's going to fill off all those edges.
I was like that going to but you got to fill first and move the edge, and but if you move it, that menu goes away. It's already
No, that's
it disappears like
That's just one of those annoying things where if you do it the wrong direction, it's just gone. It's like the same thing with when you're trying to mate. Like if you do control and then mate. I mean, usually what you can do is select it again and it'll pop back up, but it's just one of those weird things inside of SolidWorks where it just disappears, at least as far as I know. I haven't found anyone for it to stick. Yeah, there's no pin drop for that one, unfortunately. Okay, so getting into some sheet metal stuff. Just one little thing here. Instead of actually entirely flattening your part, maybe your computer is a little bit slower, you don't want to actually do that. If I right click on one of these faces and go all the way down here in that menu, there's a thing here for toggle flat display. And when I actually click that, what it'll do is it's just going to give me a preview of what my flat's going to look like. If you get a preview, it means all your bends, whatever it is that you're doing, is good, right? Previews are usually good. That way, if nothing's showing, you know, hey, whatever feature I just did, I got to go back and redo that, right? This is just a time saver. Instead of going to flatten, clicking it again. It's kind of one of those things to kind of speed up time there and know whether or not any cuts or anything you were just doing destroyed it, right? How are we doing on time here? Started at 6. Oh boy. Okay, so controlling or copying with mates. Might need to speed this up here. So I don't know when this came out exactly, but you can now copy with mates. So if I went and hovered over all this stuff, did Control C, and I went to paste it inside of this part or this new assembly. As soon as I did that, and once it loads up, all the mates that were intact before are still going to be intact, right? They don't just disappear, they don't just vanish and make you do it all over again. And this is going to work for a lot of different things that you're doing. I think we're running short on time, so let me know if I cover something too quick, but I think I might need to speed it up a little. This little check mark, all I want to point out here is if I'm putting whatever the first thing is into my assembly, instead of having it floating in space, if I just hit my green check mark, what it's going to do is lock my two origins together. So I got my front, top, and right locking up one another with my origin of my assembly along with the part, right? So now it's a good, clean spot for me to start from.
When the part makes it slow or whatever, do you undo that? Do you first part comes in as well?
Yep.
Will undo that fix?
It's still going to be fixed. I mean, you can right-click and float it, right? That's just the one way around it. It's still going to come in fixed, though. Yep. And then the same thing kind of goes for, actually, if you're trying to copy something like this, if I hold down Control and drag straight off of whatever part it was, I can drag a brand new copy of it, right? So all I'm doing is holding down Control, left-clicking and holding on that part, dragging it off. Now I got a brand new copy. If I need to change maybe a configuration, you got your little context window to make changes. You can go from there. Cool thing about this is you can do multiple things at once. So if I maybe wanted to get that base and those two pins all at one time, I can drag them, drop it, and all those mates that we copied, or all those parts that we copied, all those mates are still intact. So like we were talking about before with the copying of the mates, it's all still there. Alrighty. Looking through parts, so this is especially helpful for assemblies when you're trying to mate things in weird places. I will point out there's going to be something pretty cool coming out in 2018 that's actually going to make this a little bit easier where you don't have to actually use select other, but that's another time. But for this, if I wanted to mate to something maybe behind that face, if I right click on it and go to select other, I've now got that window open for me to select the different faces. Now inside of here, if you actually start right-clicking on all these other faces that are available, it's going to start hiding those ones too. So if I want to still see further back, if I right-click on a face, it's going to hide that one from me. So it makes it a little bit easier, a little bit cleaner to select truly what it is I'm trying to get to, right? Getting into Smartmates. Again, this is one of those things that can sometimes be helpful.
So when you're done building that assembly string, they'll pop back.
From, yeah. All you're doing is temporarily hiding it.
It pops back.
Yeah.
When you're done.
This is mostly going to be used for a lot of times when you're mating things, right? So if I've got one selection already and I'm just trying to see behind that to where I'm actually getting it,
When was that?
I couldn't even tell you. I wish I knew off the top of my head. But there's so many enhancements every year. I mean, that's. What's that? Yeah, it's going to work when pretty much placing anything. Usually if you right-click on your part, there's going to be that select other option. Yep. So, yeah. Okay. Last little thing, Smartmates. So if I'm trying to mate maybe that pin to this hole, normally I'd have to do a concentric and a coincident. Holding down my Alt key and clicking on that point right there, and then dragging it is going to start Smartmates. So you can see there's kind of that little pin icon right there. That's telling me it's going to actually put in coincident and concentric where those two pieces actually meet. Right? And I'd still have to potentially go in there and actually maybe lock rotation. That's still something I have to do, and that's kind of where this other thing comes into play of actually using a profile mate. So if I select those 2 points, you can actually do a profile mate to have it be coincident and concentric. So for big parts, I'm gonna say this because for big assemblies where you've got 1,000 bolts, or that's a bad example, but 1,000 bolts where you then have coincident and concentric for all that, using profile is basically gonna cut that in half, right? Less calculations for your mates, faster load times, saving you time in the end. And then again, we're talking about locking rotation. I can still lock rotation for profiles. So, cool thing to note. It's not just for concentric, you can also do it for profiles. Okay. We're just gonna kind of jump over that. We'll get to it at the end if we have time. Quick filters, quick little thing. Got myself all that up. So inside of here, just so you hopefully know what these are, if I've got a full list of maybe assemblies, drawing parts, etc., maybe even sub-assemblies getting in here, you can start filtering out by parts, assemblies, drawings, so that each of whatever those are only going to be listed. Extremely helpful that I find is this one on the farthest right, which is only going to show you the top level assembly. So if you've got something that sounds very identical to what you think is your top level, but you don't really know, just click that. It's going to show you whatever the top level assembly is in that folder. If you ever make faces transparent and you actually need to still select them, something that happens pretty often, just hold down Shift and then you can now select that transparent face. Right? So again, something very quick, something very simple. Can be helpful if you're trying to select that face. Alrighty. As we go into this, you can enter empty views. So this is not something that's typically on your tabs, but if you go to Insert, Drawing Views, there's an option for empty. And the reason you might do this is I can now put notes inside of this, and instead of suppressing maybe a whole view, maybe I want this to still be tied together with maybe a couple other notes and I want to move them around together, I can just suppress that view itself. Maybe I need to print it out to a customer or send it to a customer and I don't want them to see my special notes. Put it in an empty view and then just suppress it, save it, send it off. Again, got people from all places. If you don't know how to break your kind of alignment when you're trying to drag and drop things, if you hold down Control, that's going to free it off of any attachment. You can place it wherever it is you want. In addition to that, if you wanted to actually break alignment after the fact, maybe you accidentally placed it and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to move that somewhere else. If I right click, there's an option to break my alignment, and now that thing is free to move wherever it is it pleases, right? Jumping in again to 3D drawing views. So this one, it's kind of when you're trying to get a view that's not really standard, not your standard ISO, not your standard anything else. You're just trying to get a different, unique view of your part to kind of maybe highlight some special detail. So inside of here, if I go ahead on my heads-up toolbar and select it, that's that icon right there. What it's going to do is basically put whatever drawing view I select into more or less a SolidWorks environment for me to freely rotate this thing, move it around however I want, kind of get a different angle on whatever it is I need. Cool thing about this is you can save that view if you ever need to, maybe to be used in an additional part, right? And you can do this for isometric views as well. So if you cut something in half, then you want to see maybe that fine detail that you just cut out, you can just rotate it. It's called the 3D drawing view. So it's going to be found just right up here on your heads-up toolbar. Yep. I think as soon as you start to do that, it's just going to be a freestanding view. I think it breaks the link to whatever parent view that you had. Oh, you mean additionally I'd have to bring in a separate one? Okay. Haven't come across that before. Maybe because I'm only doing it on the ISO views. I'll have to check that out though. Okay, next thing here. Maybe if you're worried about somebody dilly-dallying with your drawings, maybe you want to see any changes that were done since last time. We're just going to do a quick example on this part. So if we have this thing at 3, maybe go to my drawing, open that thing up, update it, and then save it. Go ahead and try and bypass this a little bit. And then I'm going to go back into this part and go in here and change it to something else. And then I'll go back to my drawing again. And inside of here, if I rebuild, it's going to show me that 1.5 in a different color. Right, so it's kind of indicating, hey, somebody went and changed this. So if you actually wanted to, oh gosh, okay. So if you actually wanted to turn that on where it's actually working like that, it's going to be found under colors in your settings. Down here at the bottom, it says use specified color for change drawing dimensions on open. So if you need to toggle that on, you can change it to whatever it is.
Hit regenerate twice, it goes away. Or it stays.
Yeah, no, it won't stay like that. I think as soon as you save it, it's mostly once you rebuild it, open it up fresh from whatever it was before. As soon as you save it, it should go back to normal. Okay, I think this is another one that maybe came out in 2015, but it relates to angle dimensions. You don't actually need to make construction lines anymore for this. As long as you have a line going into a kind of a vertex here, as soon as you click that line and then click that vertex second, you're going to get this little, I don't even know, 4 arrows, just a, I can't think of a good word for it. Yeah, call it a gizmo. You're going to get a gizmo, and depending on which one you click, so if we click up, or we click out, so if we go ahead, click on that, and then click up, it's going to be that dimension in that direction, right? So that's kind of where it's saying, hey, I want that to be the reference point. Now you've got your angle dimension. Yep. As long as, again, you have that line going into a point. Changing around, I'm actually just going to skip that one for now. We're running real short on time here. Auto-arranging dimensions, especially when you want to auto-arrange something with precision. So if we, again, kind of go into something similar here. If I wanted to change the dimensions or the precision levels of kind of all these at once, if I highlight all those, you're going to notice this little dimension symbol with, again, the little gizmo. And when you hover over it, it's actually going to open up this little menu. Inside of here, this is where you can actually start to edit those specific dimensions. Gosh. So close, so close. Okay, you can start to edit those specific dimensions to whatever it is you want. So if I want to change my tolerance for all those to kind of upper and lower limits, whatnot, you can do that. Additionally, inside of there,
That should push back out to the part for NVD, right?
I don't think so. Usually parts have their own specified unit and unit precisions. Typically, when it comes to dimensioning and precisions like this, it's usually pretty one way. I don't know, unless somebody knows differently. Usually, it's pretty one directional. Of just what you're setting here is different from there because they both have their own unit specifications. Okay. So also inside of here, you'll notice that it's kind of not really fitting the cleanest it could. So that's kind of where, again, we've got a couple different options. You notice this first one here. If I click on that, it's going to auto-arrange my dimensions to what SolidWorks thinks is going to best have them fit nicely together, right? So if I go ahead and click it, or if I want to change the scale of it, it's going to kind of move things into kind of whatever it sees fit.
You can do that after the fact, clean up your drawing.
Yep.
And we'll just fence it in and then cover it.
Yep. And then, I mean, we showed you that select all earlier. This is a lot of times where that select all is most used. So if I select one dimension and do Control A, it's going to give me all the dimensions in that drawing. And then I can kind of auto arrange them if I want to. That's a good example of where that's actually used. So that's what I have for you today.